welcome back to Sunday Vibes, one and all. Unfortunately, we're not in the pub this week. We will be back there next week and definitely throughout the season. There's just a few too many people on holiday right now, basically. But happy to say that Dougie Critchley and Zac Jalab, I think it is today, isn't it, on the other end of the phone? How are we, boys?
Yeah, I'm all right. It's day 3 of my isolation, 3rd round of isolation this year, so I've not gone fully mad just yet. But yeah, I'm all right, thank you. Keeping sane just about with a bit of a Olympics morning. I was watching the BMX and a bit of swimming as well.
Oh, unreal.
BMX is so good to watch.
I know. What's his name?
Kai from Peckham.
When he was celebrating Beth getting over the line, I was buzzing.
It was great. 2 great races. Well done to both the Brits.
How are you doing, Deej?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Yeah, watched the cricket yesterday. It was good fun. And my voice is a little hoarse, so if it breaks, do not laugh.
Yeah, Zac had 1 beer too many at the 100 yesterday, but he is alive and kicking for this game. Do you know what? Before we get into the question, I have to say, I hope people saw this on social media today, but I just thought this is fucking decent. Jose Mourinho here, talking about Sunday Vibes.
Hello to the Football Daily team. Firstly, good luck with the Sunday Vibes show. It's always great to hear different perspectives and opinions on football. I hope that you show some respect and you are polite about me. I invite you to keep a close eye on me in my new job in Italy. It's a great opportunity for me. I'm excited and I will show you and prove to everyone how well I can do. Thanks a lot, Jose.
Yeah, so already excited to see how Pato can disrespect Jose Mourinho in 25 different ways when he returns from his paternity. But I'm very, very grateful to Adidas for sorting that out. Let's crack on with the question, though, shall we? It was sent in by Hussein AFC. He says, which under-21 player should we keep our eyes on in Europe and particularly lesser-known ones in the Prem this coming season? So should we get the obvious ones out the way? Because I mean, Sancho, Haaland, Foden. There's so many obvious ones. Let's kind of each take one of them, I would suggest, before we get into some actually interesting ones that we're excited by in the Premier League, dude.
Yeah, I think all those names. There's a plethora of great players coming through. Players are getting younger and younger as well when they emerge onto the scene as well. Just before we go into the European ones, really excited to see Harvey Elliott hopefully play a little bit for Liverpool this year. Excited to see Ansu Fati on his comeback trail for Barcelona as well. Had a really difficult time with that knee injury that he sustained in November, but prior to that he was pretty much carrying the Barcelona attack. But the player I want to give most sort of credit to, or shine the spotlight on most of all, is his teammate Pedri, who I thought was just absolutely astonishing last year. Having arrived from Las Palmas, obviously grew up in the Canary Islands, which is off the coast of Africa. So he had a really, big move to go to Barcelona. And I was reading an Athletic article, I remember at points last season, that he was getting black cabs to El Clasicos. Like he arrived with his family, like the most understated guy. He's got an enormous family. I think he's got like 6 or 7 brothers and sisters, and he was just living in a house in Barcelona with them, just getting taxis to El Clasico and just turning up and actually bossing games. He was absolutely phenomenal. Still going this season as well. I think Spain is still in the Olympics. I know they've had some dodgy results, but he's played 48 games for club and country, plus the Olympics last season. Little bit worried about burnout for the poor guy as well, considering his age. But, having carried Barcelona at points last season, I thought he was one of their best players throughout the year, along with probably Messi and Frankie de Jong in terms of consistency. And then he was phenomenal at the Euros as well. And Luis Enrique was, making no mistake about just how special his impact was. He said, what Pedri has done in this tournament at 18, no one has done. Not even Andres Iniesta did that. It's incredible, unique. And I was thinking that I don't remember Xavi breaking onto the scene. Obviously, I was only about 4 when he did in the late 90s. Iniesta took a lot longer to establish himself. But I don't remember a midfielder at Barcelona just arriving at that age and just being so dominant. So in La Liga, he started 28 matches, nearly a 90% pass accuracy, over a chance created per game, 1.6 long balls, completed 71% of his dribbles. He's got so much time on the ball. He picks the right choices at the right time. There was a game in the Euros where he nearly completed 100% of his passes as well. That was absolutely obscene. Created 11 chances in the Euros for Spain. And at points, Spain, they started the tournament quite slowly. They got going in the middle patches and were quite unfortunate against Italy in the end. But Pedri was by far and away their best player, in my opinion. And he's set for another magnificent year at Barcelona. And I think with Depay in front of him, Ansu Fati coming back from injury, as I said, and Ousmane Dembele is apparently going to sign a new deal. Yes, there's been a little bit of turmoil in terms of finances, but the Barcelona squad actually looks pretty good going into next season with a few defensive issues, you'd probably say. And Pedri, I expect him to go from strength to strength.
I cannot believe Barca managed to get Pedri for, what was it, like €2
Something
million
like that. It's a joke,
in the end,
yeah.
or like 1.8? It's just an absolute joke, isn't it? Like, this guy is frightening. I mean, are we all going to pick up on a midfielder here? Because, like, I mean, Pedri at 18 is astonishing. Should have, I suppose, Bellingham 18, not too bad.
Yeah, I mean, the guy continues to take things in his stride and looks impressive every single time he does it. I mean, this is what is now third or fourth kind of full season of professional football, and as you mentioned, he's just turned 18. He was basically 17 for the majority of last season, and then was 16 when he was playing in the Championship for Birmingham. It's so impressive, and obviously that Dortmund have spent a decent amount of cash on him to bring him there, and it looked like it was the right decision. Obviously, there was that story about how Manchester United wanted him so desperately, and they were very keen. I think they even was it Sir Alex Ferguson they got to talk to him?
Yeah, mate. Sir Alex was down taking his family for dinner. They had Cantona down there taking his
the
family
wine and dine
dinner.
treatment.
They had,
Exactly.
taking his family for trips around the stadium and the training ground, but it wasn't to be, mate.
Exactly. I mean, he obviously would have seen the success of Jadon Sancho at Borussia Dortmund and known Borussia Dortmund's talent for giving young players minutes and kind of being that stepping stone towards the next thing. And you kind of think, okay, after Haaland leaves, he's kind of the next main man for them. And the fact that he's now going to be managed by Marco Rose, who did fantastically well with Borussia Mönchengladbach, is really impressive. It's going to be interesting as well to see where he's playing next season for Dortmund, because he is a all-action central midfielder, essentially. He can play central midfield, he can play DM, and he can eventually go forward. I think there's that but there's that quote that his Birmingham City manager said, that it's the reason he wears number 22 is because he can play 10, he can play 8, and he can play in what we know as 6, but they at Birmingham called it 4, so it all adds up to 22, which I've always thought is quite a nice little little thing. But even like it statistically, like he is an all-action midfielder. He's making 3 tackles a game, another like an interception as well, so 4 tackles and interceptions. But then he's also creating 2.1 shot creating actions as well. Like he's everywhere, and I just think I can't say I've watched every single game of him last season, because that would be a lie. But I remember the Manchester City game being so impressed, obviously against a midfield of like Rodri and Kevin De Bruyne, and there's that one moment where he's making a tackle in his own box or on the edge of the box, and then sprinting to the other side and nearly scoring, and probably should have scored if that goal would have counted. And I really like this guy. He's doing this stuff. He's impressing on the biggest stages in the Champions League against Manchester City, one of probably the best team in the world at the moment. And he's only going to get better, and he's so young. He made 19 starts in the Bundesliga last season. You expect that to be more. 1,700 minutes. Got 36 games in all competition. Again, you probably expect that to be more. And as I said, now that Jadon Sancho's gone, Donyell Malen has replaced him. That he's going to be, I guess the limelight is going to be on him a lot more this season. So yeah, I think Jude Bellingham, this guy who maybe next year as well, or the summer coming in 2022, may be looked at by a few clubs for trying to get a transfer over the line, even when the Haaland deal happens.
Yeah, I mean, fingers crossed Bellingham continues to develop at the rate he does for that World Cup in Qatar in 2022, because Marco Rose, we know, such a fantastic coach. He looks like he's going to be playing in a 4-2-3-1, which I think probably could suit Jude Bellingham in playing one of those sort of 8 roles, maybe in that double pivot, or potentially even, like Zach said, in that 10 position. So excited to see how Bellingham develops under such a talented coach. While we're on the topic of midfielders, and obvious ones at that, we may as well talk about Eduardo Camavinga, I think, as well, because the reason he is one to watch is going to be where is he playing his football. I think it's such a big question surrounding Eduardo Camerovinga. Obviously, we know his agent is Jonathan Barnett, has been shopping him around to pretty much all of Europe's top clubs. 12 months left on his Rennes deal. And I think Rennes at this stage know he's not going to sign the new contract. and are pretty desperate for the cash. That French Ligue 1 TV rights catastrophe obviously has hit all the teams in the pocket quite badly, and I think they're probably aware that if they can get 35 million euros, 40 million euros for him, that is a lot of money for them, despite the fact they've seen big fees over the years for players that they've sold to Premier League clubs. With Eduardo Camavinga, where do we think he's best suited? I mean, heavily linked to Manchester United, of course. United are crying out for that defensive midfielder. Obviously, Camavinga is not a classic defensive midfielder. He's been playing in that double pivot alongside Steven Nzonzi, who sits a lot deeper in there. He's way more progressive than you'd imagine. A fantastic dribbler and ball carrier, sort of in the top 5% of defensive and midfielders in terms of ball progression numbers and dribbling completion statistics. So he's an extremely well-rounded player. So if United were to just deploy him as a defensive midfielder, I feel like it's a bit of a waste of those aspects of his game, just asking him to be a shield, because yes, he is sticking up sort of 3.5 tackles, another 2 interceptions on top of that in Ligue 1, but are you really going to throw away all those progressive carry numbers just so you can have a shielding Camavinga? I'm not too sure that works. At PSG, it feels like it'd be a fantastic fit, but they also feel like they've got both eyes on Paul Pogba right now and are kind of flirting with him quite heavily. He obviously has the dream of playing for Real Madrid, which makes a lot of sense, but I don't think it's going to happen this summer. Real Madrid's eggs are in Mbappe's basket, and if he runs his contract down, Camavinga, and he decides he's going to stay for another year, then I think he'll go to Madrid. But I think Rennes might force him out effectively because they need that money. I don't know what you think, Dukes, but do you think that Eduardo Camavinga to Madrid is even realistic this
summer? I don't think so at all. I think, as you say, like they are really gearing up for the last 2 years to sign Mbappe. Florentino Perez is said to be absolutely obsessed with the prospect of bringing him in. To be honest, I don't think he's going to go to United either. I don't think he's got quite the skill set they're looking for. He seems like he wants to stay, to aim for Spain, as you said. He'd actually be a really good pickup for Dortmund, to be honest, because Thomas Delaney and Axel Witsel are both approaching 30 plus in the case of Witsel. Obviously, Thomas Delaney had a great Euros with Denmark, but Camavinga would be excellent there. It'd be probably the right place for him to develop at 19, just for a couple of years. Take the Jude Bellingham route as well. I'm trying to think other clubs. Maybe Juventus could possibly use a midfielder of his quality. Although, having seen what's happened with Bentancur last season, he's probably slightly stagnated compared to where we thought he'd be. Maybe he'd have...
If Goretzka doesn't sign that new deal,
yeah,
Bayern,
I think he'd be great for Bayern as well. They want rid of Tolisso and Cuisance as well, so there might be a spot in their midfield. But I kind of want him to go play 35 league games a year. And if Goretzka and Kimmich are there, and with their forward options they've got, it's going to be difficult for him to get the game time. But I think he'd be an excellent pickup for United. I just don't think he's necessarily exactly the right skill set that they need right now.
No, but I do think if Pogba was to leave, United would probably go in all guns blazing for Camavinga, just because they've been so desperate to get a central midfielder in the door. Obviously, we're desperate to get Bellingham, and they might well think, look, if we were going for Bellingham, we were willing to sign Bellingham as Paul Pogba was already at the club. The profile between Bellingham and Camavinga is not totally... opposed, so I think United are probably very interested in that type of midfielder and somebody they can develop over the coming years. Obviously, Hannibal Mejbri is highly thought of in the academy as well, and I think United kind of picked between Camavinga and Mejbri, went for Hannibal a couple of years ago, so that's probably in their thinking.
He's not crazy expensive as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was about to say. But obviously, he's not going to cost the 60-70 million pounds that some central midfielders United are being linked with are. I think Camavinga to United is one to keep your eye on, especially if Paul Pogba leaves, to be honest with you. And then obviously other obvious names like Sancho at United is going to be really interesting to see how he performs this year. Haaland, can he keep the goal scoring rate up that he is at the moment? So let's not bother talking about that. Let's go on to the second part of Hussein's question, which is about lesser known Premier League wonder kids to watch. I'm going to kick it off with Marc Guehi. I think Marc Guehi is a fantastic addition to this Palace side for £18.9 million on a 5-year contract. Crystal Palace are doing some outrageous business right now. I understand that Chelsea have the option to match the bid for Marc Guehi if another club came in for him in the future, and I think they have a sell-on percentage as well. But Palace, we could have picked 2 or 3 players here. We could have easily picked Michael Olise, coming through the door, £8 million. The EFL Young Player of the Year, of course, incredibly creative for Reading. I think 12 assists, 7 goals, something like that. And obviously he's going to have to put up similar numbers given Eberiche Eze's terrible injury. Joachim Andersen, we love that move from Lyon for £15 million. They managed to barter it down, I think about 10 million quid from Lyon, so they'll be really happy with themselves there. Conor Gallagher seems like he's on the verge of a move on loan from Chelsea as well. I was really impressed by him at West Brom, to be honest with you, last season, given that he was playing in a pretty shit West Brom side, surrounded by some really average players, playing under a pretty average manager. I was really impressed by him there, so I'm hoping that Patrick Vieira can get the most out of him, and that feels like the big question mark. Dukes, do you think Patrick Vieira can get the best out of a player like Marc Guehi and Michael Olise and Joachim Andersen? Because these are great signings, but we're on the fence over the manager.
Yeah, I think he started pretty well at Nice and then it slightly deteriorated. Obviously, he had a time at New York City FC as well. His managerial career is a bit just not overwhelming, I think, in most people's cases. But obviously, with what he's done as a player, he's going to instantly command respect there. But I think it's less about, Patrick Vieira and more about just giving the hierarchy massive credit. Because what do they have? 12 players out of contract? It felt like it could all have fallen apart under Roy Hodgson. And there's no guarantee that all these young players are instantly going to hit the ground running. It might be a difficult season still. I think Palace would take survival right now, or anything just above survival, to be honest. I don't think they're going to be looking to push for top 10. I think it's just literally about bedding these players in and letting them develop. But Joachim Andersen, I think, was one of the most underrated players in the Premier League last year. I'm actually more excited about him than Marc Guehi, who might have a little bit of a harder time adapting to the Premier League, whereas Joachim Andersen, I think, would have been an excellent pickup for Arsenal, excellent pickup for Spurs, anyone just outside that top 4 bracket. But yeah, massive credit to Dougie Friedman, Steve Parish, etc. for getting these guys over the line.
Yeah, I mean, they've been doing some really good business, like, on the sly over the last couple of years as well. I mean, Eberiche Eze, I wouldn't say is on the sly, but like Nathan Ferguson hasn't quite worked out because of his injury problems, but I think they've actually got kind of now 4 or 5 really talented young players in that side that will, despite whether Patrick Vieira lasts or not, outlast him, which is a big positive for this Crystal Palace team because it was badly aging. They've let the right players go, I think. Whether or not Gary Cahill agrees that new contract seems to remain to be seen. But, Mamadou Sakho, I think it was the right time to let him go. I think it was the right time to let Scott Dann go. And Guehi comes in with huge pedigree from that Swansea side. I think if you ask most EFL and Championship fans, they would say Guehi is in the top 3 centre-backs in the league last season. Played huge amounts of minutes for Swansea and a very good Swansea defence at that. Was man of the match in both playoff semi-final legs. Fortunate not to make it to the Prem with Swansea. Obviously, he crashed out against Brentford. But, this is a player who's been capped 50-plus times by England's youth teams. Played 57 games for Swansea in all competitions last season. I mean, Jalab, you might be able to shed a bit more light on what he's like as a player. Obviously, he's a Chelsea fan, but for me, this seems like a fantastic bit of business and taking advantage of Chelsea when they're kind of selling those players to recoup some money.
Yeah, like from what I like have seen as much as anyone else, it's kind of Marc Guehi kind of looked at the Chelsea situation, saw how many centre backs we had. Obviously, then we've been linked with Jules Koundé, and his contract was coming up, I think, at the end of this season or the end of next season, something like that, and basically refused to sign a new contract at Chelsea, and wanted minutes in the Premier League. He didn't want to get into another. He didn't want to go into another loan after that, and a loan cycle continuing. And yeah, he's made a great decision to join Palace, and I think he'll be fantastic. I think he'll adapt really quickly because when he first joined Swansea on loan, it took him a little while. Took him a few weeks or so, or month or so, to really get into that squad. But once he was in, he wasn't getting out. He really wasn't getting out. He was fantastic for them. A physical guy, a strong guy, but someone that's also pretty good on the ball. I think that's what Chelsea's academy has. Like every single centre back that's come through. I forget his name. Is it Semedo? that's
Yeah.
joined Southampton, I think.
Yeah.
He's also like the youth that has come through ever since Jody Morris was in charge and Joe Edwards at Chelsea. They want their defenders being ball playing centre backs. They want them to be good on the ball, to make the right decisions, and to help start the attack. And Marc can do that. But physically as well, he's immense. I don't think he's the tallest guy, but physically he can handle himself in the Premier League easily. And I think they've got a really good defender. I kind of hope they do get Gary Cahill to sign another contract, because I do worry that like a brand new centre-back partnership of Anderson and Guehi might be a little bit too soon, if that makes sense. So like if they can have Gary Cahill there to kind of maybe take Marc under his arm a little bit, just teach him the ins and outs of what's needed at times, and then eventually an Anderson Guehi back four would probably be what I assume would be played. But I don't think it's the end of the world if Gary Cahill does. I keep calling them by their first names, like I know they're my mates. But as if Gary Cahill doesn't sign a new contract, and I think they've done some fantastic business. I think since Eze, really everyone they've signed seems to be young, up and coming kind of players, and the majority of them English as well. And yeah, I think Palace, as you said, the real factor is Vieira, but I think Marc Guehi will have a good season for sure.
Yeah, Dukes, any other players, unknown arrivals maybe, or people that need to have some respect for?
Yeah, I mean we've briefly talked about him on other shows, but I think Francisco Trincao going to Wolves, from Barcelona is a fantastic bit of business, considering it's a loan with an option to buy of £25 million. Like obviously, that Nelson Semedo deal didn't really work out for the amount of money it was. I think it was upwards of £35 million in the end. You know, it's not the same signing Barcelona players that it once was. Like Junior Firpo's gone to Leeds. We've seen Digne and Andre Gomez go to Everton in the last 3 or 4 years. Like Barcelona have made a lot of mistakes in the market, but I just don't think Francisco Trincao can really be put down as a mistake from Barcelona, given his age and the competition at the top for Barcelona even last year, which is going to become even more fierce this season. So obviously brought to Wolves, agents George Mendes. Quite easy for them to be, exactly. Portuguese, George Mendes, tick, you're off to Wolves, mate. And it made kind of sense from a Wolves perspective and a Barcelona perspective. Like, didn't get much game time. There, 42 appearances last season, but 32 of those appearances were as a substitute, and he only started 3 times in La Liga. And I think the exciting thing for him going to Wolves is hopefully he'll start at least 20 league games, I would have thought. I think he's got the quality to do that. He's linking up with Pedro Neto as well, who's a childhood friend. They both grew up in Viana do Castelejo, which is a seaside town in northern Portugal. And yes, I did just nail that pronunciation. And he offers something different for Wolves as well, because obviously when Wolves dominated possession under Nuno, it was often quite slow, quite sort of steady. There wasn't a lot of sort of line breaking. When they counter-attack with pace with Neto and Adama Traore running vertical lines, cutting in angles, they were brilliant. But Trincao gives them the opportunity to sort of dominate the ball in better areas, and I think he's got an absolutely magnificent left foot as well. Obviously broke through at Braga, so Bruno Lange, the new manager at Wolves, will know him well because he used to manage Benfica, where he won the league title, and then they sold João Felix, and then they had a little bit of a drop-off the next year. But he was brilliant at Braga in 2019-20, Trincao. 14 goal involvements in 17 starts, got that £20 million move to Barcelona. Obviously struggled to make an impact, as I already said. Stylistically, according to Y-Scout and all the stats we've got available to us, he's got a sort of similar profile to Riyad Mahrez in terms of playing off the right, mainly using that left foot, cutting in, etc., looking for angles and the top corner, etc. He's a very good dribbler as well. His link-up play scores really highly, 91 out of 100 on Smarter Scout. So he's going to offer something different to Wolves. And you think likes of Raul Jimenez coming back from that injury, Adama Traore, Pedro Neto, they've got a little bit more about them this season, Wolves. It's obviously going to be a difficult season for them. I think Rui Patricio is an enormous loss in goal, despite the fact he had, by his own standards, a sort of mediocre season last year. Don't know a lot about Jose Sarr, who they brought in from Olympiacos, but he's got pretty massive boots to fill, not just as on the pitch, but as a leader. I think Rui Patricio would have made a massive difference in that regard. Obviously, they might still lose Ruben Neves as well. Jan Moutinho's a year older. Leander Dendoncker is just Leander Dendoncker. So It might be a potentially difficult season for Wolves, but I'm excited to see what Trincao can do if he's given 20 starts, because I think he could really up the creativity and the ability of Wolves to keep the ball in dangerous areas.
Yeah, I think there are some exciting young players in this Wolves side as well, and I think Bruno Lange moving to that back four might unlock a few of them. You never know. We might actually see Vitinha get some minutes. We might actually see Fabio Silva get some minutes, because they do have some really exciting young players. You know, like Nori, I think, might be played in a slightly more advanced role than he has been over the last couple of seasons, where he's been deployed as more of a wing back, right, under Nuno. So I'm quite excited by this Wolves side. I am concerned whether Bruno Lange is the right guy, but they've definitely got some extremely talented young players in that setup right now. So fingers crossed they do well. Jalab, any other names you wanna say before we move on?
Yeah, I think Billy Gilmour. He's probably a little bit more known than the other guys. That's for sure. Obviously, he's been in the Chelsea squad now for 2 seasons, the first team. But this is now his kind of his time, really. Obviously, he's just joined Norwich on loan for the season, and I think he's going to be fantastic. I've been a massive fan of Gilmour for a while now, even just when he was in the academy days, and obviously Chelsea picked him up from Rangers 4 years ago now, I think. Yeah, something about that time. I think around 2016 or 2015. And he, at the Chelsea academy, has been always regarded as one of the best players. He's a guy that can play kind of DM, central midfield, has done 10 as well for Chelsea, but that I doubt we'll see that at Norwich or really in his career. And I think the Norwich move is literally perfect for him. Last season, he only got 260 minutes of action, which is not enough for someone that is 20 now. And we spoke about Jude Bellingham earlier, who's just turned 18, and how he had 1,700 minutes, and how well he's been progressing. So he really needed to get some football. But he is of a level where he can be playing in the Premier League. Doesn't need a championship loan like maybe some of the other kind of loanies that Chelsea do. He could easily be playing in the Premier League, and he was a wanted man. According to the Athletic, Wolves, Southampton and Newcastle were all after him, but Chelsea apparently were very impressed with Farke's work with Ollie Skip, who was there on loan last season from Spurs, and he played a ridiculous amount of times, played 44 times for Norwich, and finished 3rd in Norwich's Player of the Year rankings. And so it's the perfect place for Billy to be right now, to kind of play the same kind of football that Chelsea play. Apparently that's why Tuchel wanted him to go to Norwich, because they play a similar formation. They try to play the similar kind of football to how Chelsea do, like slow progressive attack, slow build up, I should say. And I think hopefully what he'll be planning is that if he can get a great season under him, then next season he'll be battling the likes of Jorginho, of Kovacic, maybe Chelsea go on to sell one of them, and he can kind of get into that first team. Because one of my favourite things about Billy Gilmour is just how progressive he is, how open. Like the first thing that's always in his mind is the forward pass. Whereas say someone like Jorginho or Kovacic, they want to keep the ball, which is fair enough, and it's the way Tuchel wants to play. But Billy Gilmour is always thinking about that first pass forward, and normally finds it. I would say 8 times out of 10. But that being said, Tuchel has also said that he wants Gilmour to improve his work off the ball in pressing and tactical positioning. Which, as we know how much Tuchel is a stickler for these kind of things, and so hopefully a season out in Premier League football, playing at the highest level he could possibly play, will be good for him. I do slightly worry, obviously, about how it's going to go for Norwich this season. Obviously they're going to be kind of similar to how they were 2 seasons ago. They're going to try and play nice football, and I just kind of hope that it works out this time, rather than obviously getting relegated as they did previously. But I think Billy Gilmour is definitely one to watch, and someone that we'll be talking. I won't be surprised if we'll be talking about as maybe a young player of the year come the end of the season.
Oh,
love it!
What a huge claim! A defensive midfielder in there for Young Player of the Year, competing with the likes of Jadon Sancho, Phil Foden, playing alongside Jack Grealish potentially. So let's move on to quick fire questions then, because I think we've thrown quite a few names at you there that are fairly interesting. And do you know what? Because the news broke last night, Dukes, I just want to get your thoughts on the Jack Grealish move to Manchester City. It's seeming like it's getting closer and closer by the day. Fabrizio says it will be wrapped up in the coming days. A decision either way will be made, whether or not he signs that new contract or if he goes to Manchester City. If you were Grealish, Are you going? Do you think it's a good move for City? What are your thoughts?
I'm 100% going if I was Grealish. I think he deserves it, to be honest. I think he's taken Aston Villa as far as he can. I mean, he nearly left for Spurs a few years ago. He's had other opportunities to leave. He did a phenomenal year last year. Kept Villa up pretty much single-handedly the year before, once Wesley got injured as well. And then when they improved their signings last year with, you know, Matty Cash come in, Ollie Watkins, etc., Villa looked really good until he got injured towards the back end of the year. Obviously became a bit of an English cult hero amongst men and women during the Euros. He's now reached sort of superstar status. He's at the perfect age for Man City. What I thought was quite interesting was reading an Athletic article this week about Pep supposedly wanting him to play him more centrally than I thought, which is good.
As a midfielder.
Yeah, which is good news for Raheem Sterling, because I thought he was, you know, with the way the end of last season went for Sterling at Man City, he felt like he was probably the one under most threat by Grealish's arrival, just because Riyad Mahrez was playing so well for City on that right wing, obviously. But yeah, it looks like if Bernardo Silva's going to leave, which doesn't look that likely given that Atletico Madrid have brought in Rodrigo de Paul and Barcelona are struggling for finances, then, you know, Grealish potentially is gonna slip into that midfield area. The prospect of him lining up in a midfield alongside Rodri and De Bruyne is pretty tantalising. I'm not sure how it really works on a practical level, but I think he's going to be an excellent addition for Man City. Obviously, one of the best dribblers in Europe, one of the best creators in the Premier League. Like this is perfect. Very excited to see him in Skylight Blue. But I would have thought, the striker was the more pressing issue, to be fair, for City. Grealish is a bit of an extra given the standard of wing talent they've got. But maybe if they bring in a striker as well towards the end of the window, Kane or not, this league title is going to be very difficult to wrestle from their grasp.
I mean, they barely had a striker last year,
Yeah.
to be quite honest. Like, they had what they had already. I mean, Sergio Aguero barely played. But yeah, I mean, Jack Grealish goes to City, it's just going to be disgusting. I do wonder though how he's going to be with, like, obviously Pep's going to make him work.
Yeah.
Like, especially if he's playing in midfield and centrally. Like, Pep's going to want him to have to shift back if needed.
Remember when Bernardo Silva turned up at City and he was kind of like a little intricate,
Yeah,
dribbly
yeah.
winger who obviously
Yeah.
had good pressure statistics coming out of Monaco, and like what he is now feels totally different to the player he is when he arrived.
Yeah,
I just
there's
think that
one guy's gonna do
Grealish.
it.
I think Grealish is such a smart investment at 25. I really do. Whether it's 100 million, 90 million, whatever they end up paying for him, I think is absolutely worth it. Because to be honest with you, I just back Pep to make it work.
Yeah.
Like, if Pep thinks that Grealish is the signing he wants over Kane, I back that decision from Pep. I think, okay, are we now going to see a side where KDB is lining up as the false nine? You've got Foden one side, Sterling one side, Grealish playing as the creative midfielder with like Rodri and somebody else. I think it's outrageous. Yeah. So if Pep believes that he can get Grealish to push that level of output from central midfield and carry the ball and be progressive, I think he put the most progressive or the most dribbles into the penalty box of any player in Europe last season. He only played 25 games. It's like, imagine what he will do at City and how much Pep will improve him. But I do worry a little bit for Villa. Like, Villa have built a large amount of this squad around the idea of Jack staying. Win percentage last year with him was like 50, without him was like 25%. And I understand the Buendia arrival offsets that slightly, but I think they need to, if he does go, and he might still sign the contract, but if he does go, they really need to get the reinvestment of that £100 million right, because we've seen it in the past, teams get a huge sum and spunk it up the wall. But I think their recruitment's been pretty good recently, so there's no reason to say it won't happen. But they need to be smart with who they buy with that money.
I thought one of the most interesting things about that article that we both read about Grealish, and maybe Zac did too, I'm not sure, was the fact that obviously he wins so many fouls. Like, it's a key part of his games, like winning fouls, getting Villa up the pitch. Whereas, you know, Man City being such a dominant ball possession side, they don't really need to win fouls, and like their dominance in terms of attacking set pieces isn't, you know, it's not a key part of their game. So Grealish might have to change his game slightly to, rather than to go for that final move on a dribble and win that foul, to be able to pass at high speeds as well and know when to pass rather than just go for that dribble constantly. But I'm sure he's such an intelligent footballer, I'm sure he'll work it out.
Yeah, 100%. All right, let's do another quick fire question. And this one is from Dave Foss. It's also transfer related. He says, should United cash in on Pogba to sign an out-and-out DM, Zach?
How much are they getting? Around 50 million?
40 to 50, I think, is the price that's been quoted, isn't it?
I think no, personally. But this is a personal pick because I really want to see Paul Pogba in this United side where they've finally, started sorting out positions. A side that's got a great defence with Varane and Maguire, that's got Jadon Sancho on the right wing, Rashford on the left, and Greenwood through the middle. Like, it's something that I, not being a United fan, but as a football Premier League fan, like, I'm excited to see. Really, really excited to see. But I also do get the kind of saying that, look, if we can. As we kind of mentioned, go out and get the Rennes midfielder. I've completely forgotten his name. Camavinga and a fully out-and-out DM. I do get it. Maybe it makes more sense for long-term planning and long-term thinking, but I do really want to see Paul Pogba in this United side.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I think United need to make a decision, effectively. It feels at the moment like it's being dilly-dallied around. I think United need to set a date and say if Pogba hasn't signed a contract by August the 5th, then we have to look at alternatives, because United cannot afford to lose Paul Pogba for free twice. This is a player who is our record signing, £90 million. Extremely talented. Nobody is denying Paul Pogba is talented. He's probably the most naturally talented player United have got in the squad. And when he's fit and firing, he is almost unplayable. Look at him for France. I have seen that at times at United. But United, obviously I would love Pogba to sign a new contract. Desperate for him to sign a new contract. But if he's not going to do it by a set date, United need to move on, cash in, and reinvest it in the squad. There's a reason Donny van de Beek was brought to the team last year. It was definitely with Pogba in mind. Definitely we're thinking about, if Pogba leaves, it would allow us to just sign a defensive midfielder, because we'd already have a covering player who can play a number of roles in the midfield. Because Pogba does become an issue for United. Does he play out on the left, where he's very effective, over Rashford? Doesn't play over Bruno? Does he play as one of the two? It hasn't quite worked. I think that United need to set a deadline and say, if it's not going to happen by now, we need to cash in and we need to reinvest it in a lights-out defensive midfielder. If United sold Pogba for £50 million, sold Lingard for £20 million, and went out and said, okay, we're going to put another 20 on the table and we're going to have a stab at Ndidi, I think that would be smart business. But I think United are going to if and are about it, and I can see Pogba not signing a new deal, not leaving this summer, and leaving for free next year, signing a pre-contract in January, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that would kind of suit him and Raiola financially as well. That's the big thing, isn't it? They know they can get a much bigger wage. They know they can get a much bigger agent fee if he leaves for free. I've kind of flip-flopped on this. I thought it was almost like I was more sure that he was going to leave. I think it's just getting a bit tight to the end of the window now as well. It's going to be a really complicated deal for PSG, who apparently are a little bit concerned about their revenue this season, because in France the COVID situation is quite difficult. They don't know whether they'll get full match day revenue and at what stage they'll get full match day revenue. And obviously they've signed Donnarumma onto this enormous deal. Sergio Ramos, Achraf Hakimi's already been given big wages and a £50 million fee. Wijnaldum as well. So it might suit PSG and Pogba to wait till next year, but it would definitely suit United more, I think, to get £50 million for sure.
Yeah, 100%. All right, we'll do one more quick-fire question then before we wrap it up. This one from FFC Gary. Which of the newly promoted sides will perform the best this coming season? Do we have any concerns? Do we think there's anybody who's going to surprise us?
I think Watford might struggle, to be honest. I just don't really back that much their squad. I didn't watch them that much in the Championship. I've got to hold my hands up on that. But they've got a very trigger-happy owning family, as we all know. Yeah. I don't think they've got that much star quality. I think they might be a little short of goals as well. So I think Watford might struggle. I expect Norwich to do better than they did last time round. But there is a certain amount of pressure on Milot Rashica as well, coming in from Werder Bremen, who had a pretty disappointing 2019-20. It was phenomenal the year before, but really dropped off last year amidst some injury problems as well. And then Brentford just feel like a bit of an unknown quantity at this level.
Yeah, they could be unreal, but they also could be terrible.
Right? Heavily reliant on how Ivan Toney starts the Premier League.
Yeah, heavily, hugely. And I actually kind of back Ivan Toney to kind of had like a decent season. I think maybe reach between maybe, I don't know, 12 and 15 goals, which I think isn't too bad in his first
That'd be
season.
amazing.
And if they do,
that'd be unreal in his first
it would,
season.
yeah. And if they do go down, then I reckon he'll get picked up by a team. I want to hear what Joe thinks on Pookie. What's
I'm
he
not
saying?
putting my neck on the line with Pookie, but yeah, I agree with Dukes. I think that Norwich, like, they're definitely going to be a more switched on side in the Premier League, I think, if that's the right way of putting it. But I do worry without Buendia's output how much reliance is going to be on Milo Rashica. Like, Billy Gilmour has to really replace fantastic output from Ollie Skip last year. So I think they'll be a little bit more streetwise. Brentford excite me the most. I think Watford probably I'm the least hot on of the three. I agree with you, Dukes. Like, the transfer business has been okay. I can see Xisco struggling to be in a job by like January, given how trigger happy these owners are. If he starts poorly, he might start really well though, but if he has a run of 5 games, suddenly the guns are out at Watford, aren't they? So I think there's quite a few Premier League teams this season that have been extremely unimpressive in the summer, is all I will say. Newcastle United, for instance, are no better than these teams coming up. If I was Brentford, I'd be backing myself to finish above Newcastle. Southampton, if they lose, and still might lose, Danny Ings, I think, have had an extremely unimpressive summer so far. Brighton, I think, will do better this year. I think they'll be higher up the table. Expected goals can't keep going against them. So even if I was Watford and they haven't had this many injections of like top-level player, I think, given that there's some shitters in the league, I still think they're going to be alright, these sides.
No, I agree. I think, as you said, I think Watford is the one. I mean, they're going to be heavily reliant on Ismaila Sarr and is it João
Pedro as well, yeah.
João Pedro, yeah.
João Pedro, who's obviously not. I don't think he was playing for them in the Premier League.
Well, if they get some goals out of Josh King, like he's performed in the league before. Josh King, he's like been fairly consistent.
Sure,
so there's no reason he
didn't.
can't score.
I was talking to
I've
got a Watford friend, and I saw him. I saw
Everton.
my Watford friend last weekend at a barbecue, and I was saying, what's going to be going on with Watford? Who's going to be getting your goals? I was like, oh, surely it's João Pedro, and he was like, no, it's probably going to be Cucho Hernandez, who come in as a bit of a wild card. He spent the last few years on loan in Spain. He had a really good year for Huesca a couple of years ago.
Pato's high.
Yeah, exactly. Pato got on the Cucho Hernandez train a few years ago, but apparently he's ready to be their sort of one of their key sources of goals. But he didn't seem overwhelmed with their chances either, so he didn't fill me with confidence.
So we're not saying that Troy Deeney's going to play. How many games Troy Deeney going to play? I reckon 5 maximum.
Ooh, yeah, I'm not too sure. I mean, he's going to be in there as more like an experienced head, though, isn't he?
Yeah, for sure, 100%.
All right, then, that's it for today's episode of Sunday Vibes. Boys, have you got anything you want to plug?
Why don't you go check out Friday's Continental Club on Euro Football Daily. We talked about, similar vein to this. Actually, no, this is more about signings, how they'll do current signings. We were talking about signings that could happen for slightly easier amounts of money. Players who've got 1 year left on their deal and where they could end up, including Lorenzo Insigne. There was a shout for him to go to Dortmund. So, not to be missed.
Ooh.
Yes, very exciting. All right, do you have anything?
Snapchat, come over there, type in Football Daily and watch us.
Yes, there we go. All right, thanks very much for watching, everybody. See you later.
Bye.